I'm Molly, and this is Mary Kay, and it is cold outside. We're here for another segment of Ask the Experts, and today we're going to talk about insulating plants in the cold and whether or not you should cut back those plants at this time of year. So Mary Kay is going to get us started.
We've had a lot of questions about plants in the landscape. Should I cut them back now or should I wait? And there are different rules of thumb we can go by. We have plants that freeze back at the first hard freeze, which we did have last night. They freeze back to the ground like Mexican bush sage and Katie's dwarf aurelia. They kind of go to mush. You can tell that they're dead all the way to the ground. Those are perfectly fine to cut all the way back to the ground, get them out of your landscape. They're going to look ugly anyway. There are others that you have a little bit of leeway on. The lantanas are one. If you absolutely do not like the look of lantanas that have the leaves have frozen, maybe they're hanging on and they haven't dropped off yet, you can cut those back very short and then interplant with your pansies or your winter color. It's better, however, to leave them because their branches on top will provide some insulation to the crown of the plant at the soil line. So that's really up to you. If you do cut them back, you might want to mulch them a little bit heavier if we were going to have a sustained freeze, say in the mid-20s or below. The other ones are the evergreen perennials like the Salvia greggii. We would not cut those back until late February. As a matter of fact, most pruning for the winter on our perennials I put off until late February, early March. You definitely want to get them before they start putting out new growth because you don't want to cut off growth that they've saved carbohydrates all summer to put on. So get them before they start to put out new growth. This is usually late February. And I will be having a seminar the last Saturday in February. We hope you can come out for. I'll be demonstrating how to do that with our handy Felco pruners. But in general, cut back the ones that are just die back to the ground, the herbaceous perennials. Don't do anything to your evergreen perennials yet. And ornamental grasses, it's the same as the lantanas. I like looking at them in the winter. I think they add a nice texture and winter color to the landscape. So no need to cut those back. It's actually better to leave them till late February if you can stand looking at them. They're usually very pretty anyway. When you do cut them back, you're going to be cutting them back to about 6 inches from the ground. You want it, again, you have to do that before the new growth starts in the spring. Late February is the time. Molly's going to talk to us now about how to protect those tender plants when we have hard freezes like we did last night.
So we get a lot of questions. Is it time to cover my plants? When we have a hard or sustained freeze, absolutely cover your plants. It's important when you cover your plants with a product like this Insulate to go over the entire plant all the way back down to the ground. Covering just the top of the plant doesn't do any good because you're trying to capture the heat and the insulative qualities of the ground. So be sure when you cover a plant, cover the entire plant all the way to the ground and anchor the cover with some bricks or anchor pins so that you're capturing the heat from the ground. Another thing that's good to cover is your containerized plants. The container has elevated the roots above ground level, and so they're more susceptible to a freeze. So you can actually take blankets and go around the pot to provide a layer of insulation for those roots and cover those plants. One thing that we want you to know is to never cover with plastic. Covering with plastic will actually damage your plants. So if you do use plastic, be sure to use a blanket or a material like this so the plants don't come in contact with the plastic sheeting. You can use Christmas lights inside the covering to provide a little warmth. Not LED lights, those don't generate any heat. They have to be the old-fashioned little twinkly Christmas lights. And those will provide a couple extra degrees of protection in your landscape. Mary Kay reminded me of some great plants that it's important to cover, and I'll let her tell you which plants we should be covering right now.
Okay. At 25 degrees, our sago palms are susceptible to the tops freezing, so I would definitely wrap those. Again, anchoring it to the ground to capture the ground heat. Cyclamen, the blooms will take it to 32 degrees, the plants themselves to 25. So if they're in pots, bring them in, and if they're in the ground, cover them well. Citrus trees, the Satsuma mandarin oranges are the most winter hardy, with the Meyer lemons being next and the limes being the least winter hardy. If they're planted in the ground, you can build some kind of structure around them to enclose them and then heat them, or you can cover them again if they're not too big and anchor it to the ground. If they're in pots, I take a lot of my potted plants and move them to the southeast side of my house because the northwest is where our winter winds come from. I'll even lay them down sometimes on the up against the house on the southeast side, and then just cover them with layers of blankets. And that has done very well for me in years past. You don't want to leave them that way because they'll be against the ground. It could be wet and they could start molding or rotting. But for a day or two, just to get you through the very heavy freezes, that works very well with citrus, plumeria, brugmansia, and other tropicals like that. Even bougainvilleas, I would tend to bring them into my garage if they're in a pot. If they're in the ground, you can cut them back and mulch heavily for the root systems. They may or may not come back. The plumbago as well, you can cut those back, mulch the root systems heavily for the winter, being sure to take it off in the summer before they resume growth. But that's how I do it, and it seems to work pretty well.
Great. Well, this has been another segment of Ask the Experts. If you have questions for us, you can go to our website and submit your question, and we'll be happy to answer it in our next video. For Backbone Valley Nursery, I'm Molly, and this is Mary Kay.
See you next week.